That day started like any other. I entered the Treasury building through the side door, as I always do, clutching a lukewarm cup of coffee and a head full of numbers racing faster than I could think. The final version of the One Big Beautiful Bill was nearly complete. A historic proposal, a milestone for the second term, and me? I was just the one putting the final pieces together. I remember the flickering fluorescent light above. I remember every voice in that meeting room. I remember the way a colleague patted my shoulder and said, "Big day today." I nodded. Inside, nothing felt unusual. But now, looking back, something had shifted. Something so subtle, like a breath held too long. We began the meeting. We went over details, discussed what would stay, what would be cut. The atmosphere was focused, professional, completely normal. Then, suddenly, as I was speaking, the sound drained out. Every noise vanished, as if someone had flipped a switch and shut off the entire world. I felt a heaviness in my chest, not pain, just emptiness, like a vacuum opening right in the center of me. I tried to say one more sentence, but no words came out. I collapsed, eyes wide open, and everything went black. And then, in the moment I thought would be the end, I heard a question. It didn't come from anyone, but it echoed deep inside my mind. If today was the last day you ever wrote something for this nation, are you certain it was the right thing? The question repeated itself, softly but relentlessly, like waves, like a distant bell tolling. I don't know how long I fell. I just know I was no longer there. And what I was about to see next would completely redefine my understanding of influence, of policy, and of the soul of a nation. But the strange thing was, the place I landed in wasn't darkness. It wasn't light either. It was a crossroads. And the person waiting for me there was a familiar face, someone I never expected to see again. I wasn't standing, I wasn't flying. I was simply present, weightless, unbound. All sense of time dissolved like ink spreading across water. In front of me stood a gate. Not tall, not glowing, just a doorway opening into a place no logic dared to name. And standing in front of it was a man in a faded shirt, hands in his pockets, looking at me not with judgment or pity, but as if he had been waiting a long, long time. It was my father. The man I used to argue with night after night when he was alive. A man who worked decades in steel, retired with a meager pension and a heart worn down by a healthcare system that treated him like a number. My father died 4 years ago of heart failure, something that might have been treatable if he'd had better insurance. I couldn't speak, but he did, softly, clearly. "David, you think you're building a better America. But do you know that every number you cut is a person losing a chance to live?" I wanted to argue. I wanted to say I was just following protocol, that I wasn't the one making all the decisions. But I stayed silent, because deep down, I had always known. My father didn't blame me. He simply raised his hand and pointed toward the gate. "You're going to see," he said, "both roads, and when you come back, if you come back, you'll have to choose." Choose? I thought everything had already been written. I thought I was just one cog in a massive machine. But I began to realize every word I typed, every report I submitted, every dollar I cut carried a voice, a choice, a declaration of what we consider worth saving and what we believe can be left behind. I stepped through the gate, and what I saw first wasn't heaven or hell. It was America, not the one we know today, but a version of the future shaped by the very decisions we make right now. A place where the policies we pass become the reality millions must live with. I expected to see streets draped in flags, LED billboards flashing record-high GDP, a booming stock market, and polished commercial districts straight out of that year's fiscal report. And yes, I saw all of that. The city before me was clean, modern, and undeniably prosperous. There were no panhandlers, no trash-lined streets, no blaring ambulance sirens. Everything moved with the precision of a minimalist machine, efficient, smooth, and emotionless. But the more I looked, the more I realized something was missing. No one made eye contact, no smiles, no shared glances. The private hospitals glowed in sterile brilliance, yet quietly turned away those who didn't meet the required insurance score. The schools were sleek and well-funded, but only for families with high social credit ratings. I walked into a housing complex, immaculate, orderly, but inside I saw an elderly woman trembling as she gave herself an insulin shot, her Medicaid no longer covering monthly prescriptions. In a small park, a veteran silently wrapped his leg with an old t-shirt, unable to afford basic care. A child walked to school in shoes 2 sizes too small, staying silent because her mother lost SNAP benefits when her income rose just a few $100s past the eligibility line. The news screen streamed endless statistics of success, but never once did they show the faces of those who had been trimmed away. The loudspeakers proclaimed that America had never been stronger, but I heard no voice ask, "Has anyone been left behind?" And then that question echoed inside me, like a steady drumbeat pressing against my mind. Can growth without compassion truly be called progress? If you live in a strong nation where no one reaches for another's hand, can you still feel proud? Do you ever think about the ones who no longer speak because they've been stripped of even their voice? I wanted to look away, but I knew this was only half the truth. "You haven't seen it all," my father said softly behind me, his voice heavier than before. "There's another vision, one where things aren't perfect, but people still hold on to each other through something no government can tax: compassion." As I turned away from the dazzling lights of that flawless city, a gentle breeze carried me to another place. It wasn't grand, it wasn't shiny, but it was warm, so deeply warm. The sky was overcast, the streets were not as clean, the buildings wore chipped paint, the parks lacked modern equipment, and the schools showed signs of wear. But this place had something the other one never did: laughter. I saw a nurse, just off her shift and still in scrubs, dividing her dinner among 3 homeless men. A man held a cardboard sign that read, "Unemployed, but still praying for America," and a stranger stopped to hand him a pair of gloves. A black teenager helped an elderly white man onto a bus, and the old man's grip on the boy's hand was tighter than family. In a corner of a public hospital, doctors and nurses sat close, planning how to work extra hours after budget cuts. No one complained. Their eyes lit up when they mentioned the heart surgery scheduled next week for a patient with no insurance. I saw a priest holding an outdoor class for children who couldn't afford school. A single mother clutched her child, holding back tears, grateful just to keep a portion of her medical aid after a local council meeting. Nothing was perfect, but everything was real. No one was wealthy, but no one was forgotten. People didn't have much, but they shared nearly all they had. No laws forced it, no sweeping policies demanded it. Just one thing made it possible: human kindness. I began to cry, not out of pity, but out of remembrance, because once upon a time, America was like this. And suddenly I realized those numbers I used to cut, those reports I used to approve, may have made these small acts harder with each passing day. So, what should we choose? A society where everyone has enough but lives behind closed doors? Or is one still struggling, yet where people still truly see one another? What truly defines a nation? Its budget surplus, or the number of hearts still beating for each other? I turned to my father, still silently standing beside me, and he asked only one thing. "You've seen both paths. If you go back, what will you write in your final report?" We stood at the crossroads between the 2 futures I had just seen. One, a thriving city cold to the touch; the other, a struggling community radiant with warmth. I turned to my father. He held my gaze with eyes that carried no blame, no pressure, just a depth that made it impossible to look away from myself. "You've seen," he said, his voice low and steady like wind moving through stone. "And now you must answer a question far greater than any vote ever cast in Congress." I said nothing. He went on, "If you return, will you continue as before, or will you write something new, something that cannot be taxed, something that preserves the soul of this nation?" I didn't know how to respond. All my life I had followed the rules, followed the process, followed the numbers. But now I was staring down a question that no spreadsheet could answer. Did I have the courage to rewrite something, not in the language of economics, but with the language of compassion? I saw the faces I had once looked past, the exhausted nurses, the mother unable to afford her child's medication, the elderly man turned away from the support he desperately needed. I also saw the conference rooms where we clapped for clean, efficient cuts, where we raised our glasses to a beautiful budget. But now I knew. Each of those numbers was a silent blade slicing away someone's vital lifeline. I bowed my head. I didn't cry. I simply felt my heart begin to grow heavier, like it was relearning how to be human. "I want to go back," I whispered, "not to fix everything, but to at least fix what I can." My father said nothing, but his eyes gave the quiet permission I didn't know I was waiting for. And then I felt a great pressure pressing against my chest, like a tide pulling me backward through time. Everything around me spun and tightened, the light narrowing into a single beam. I heard the sound of machines, voices calling my name, a gasp, a clap of hands. I opened my eyes. I had come back. But the question wasn't over, because in that moment I knew coming back was only the beginning. The harder part would be ensuring that the warning I carried wouldn't be drowned out by spreadsheets and applause. Would I have the courage to speak up in a system that preferred silence? When I opened my eyes, the hospital ceiling light made me squint. There were no angelic choirs, no glowing halos, just the steady beep of a heart monitor, the smell of antiseptic, and a nurse staring at me in disbelief. "You're awake," she said, her voice trembling. "It's a miracle." 4 minutes of clinical death, an emergency resuscitation. My heart had stopped, but I came back, not with a sense of triumph, but with a new burden: how to speak of what I'd seen in a world too busy to believe in what can't be measured. When I was discharged, I returned to my office. Same meeting room, same familiar faces. But I was no longer the man I used to be. I looked over the draft bill again, line by line, section by section. What I once saw as optimizations now appeared as cold cuts. I remembered the little girl needing medical care, the elderly man slumped in the hospital waiting room, and I understood. My task wasn't to overturn everything, but to begin asking the right questions. During the next meeting, when we discussed cuts to public health funding, I raised my hand. The room went quiet. I rarely spoke out of turn. "I think we need to reconsider this cut," I said slowly. "It might make the numbers look better, but I'm not sure it helps people live better." Silence, a furrowed brow, a chuckle, but I didn't back down. I knew change doesn't happen with one dramatic gesture. It starts with someone willing to say, "We need to rethink this." I didn't know if I convinced anyone, but I knew it was the promise I made to my father and myself when I was given the chance to return. What I didn't expect was this. The silence that followed didn't last. In the days that followed, someone pulled me aside and whispered, "I've thought the same thing, but I was afraid." So, how many others feel the same, but have never dared to speak? News of my revival after 4 minutes of clinical death spread quickly through the office. Some looked at me like I was a curiosity. Others avoided eye contact. But what I hadn't expected was how many people, so many people, quietly came to find me. A young manager sat across from me in the cafeteria, voice barely above a whisper. "My son had a rare disease. We lost him because the insurance wouldn't cover treatment. I've never shared this in any meeting." A retired staff member spoke in the elevator. "I almost resigned years ago. I felt like I was helping push policies I no longer believed in, but I needed someone brave enough to go first." One by one, each is like a piece of a puzzle, and I realized I wasn't alone. There was a quiet circle, still here, still watching, still holding on. They didn't speak, not because they didn't see, but because they were afraid, or numb, or convinced they were just one small gear in a massive machine. I began rewriting internal reports, but this time I added human annotations. I included real examples. If we cut the emergency fund, how many families with stroke victims will run out of time before help arrives? If we eliminate rural healthcare grants, how many children will go unvaccinated? No longer just $10 million in annual savings. Now it was 12,000 premature births without proper care. Not just a 2% operational cut, but 4,500 low-income households may lose electricity access during winter. I wasn't accusing anyone, I was just telling the truth. And something remarkable happened. Every time I dared to speak the truth, someone else dared to nod in agreement. Then someone asked me, "Why did you change?" I looked at them and smiled gently. Because I saw a version of America without compassion, and I was afraid my child would grow up in that world. What I didn't tell them was, there was still one final choice, one last decision I had yet to make. At that time, the final version of the bill was about to be presented to Congress. The budget lines were locked in, growth charts had been meticulously adjusted, and I had one last chance. An appendix I was authorized to draft as the oversight officer for special allocations. I sat alone in my office. The soft yellow light spilled over the thick stack of documents. But this time, I didn't begin with fiscal objectives. I didn't repeat the usual dry administrative language. I wrote, "This is not the final report of a Treasury official. This is a letter from a father, a son, a citizen, who died and was given the grace to return and say one thing: do not forget the people behind the numbers." I shared my near-death experience, not sensationalized, not exaggerated. I spoke of the two Americas I had seen, one where no one lacked anything, but no one loved anyone either, and one where people had little, but they held on to one another. I included a few small proposals: preserve funding for rural public health care, restore the emergency fund for seniors, and reevaluate special education aid in underserved communities. Each one minor on its own, but if implemented, they could save not only lives, but also the public's faith in a government that puts people above all. When I submitted the report, I didn't know how far it would travel. I wasn't sure how many would read it to the final line, but I knew I had done the only thing I could, within the time I was still given to live and act. And the final looping question remains. You may not change an entire nation, but you can change how you write one line, and that line might change the path of a person, a community, a future. So if today were the day you could rewrite something, what would you write?